Welcome, fearfully and wonderfully made human, to the Holistic Counselor Podcast, the place for faith driven, science backed conversations on mental health and holistic wellness. I'm your host, Diana S. Rice, licensed mental health counselor, certified integrative mental health professional, and lover of all things healing. I first met today's guest through the Holistic Business Network during an online meeting, and right away I was intrigued. She started telling me about EFT, emotional freedom techniques. And of course, my curiosity kicked in. I wanted to know more. But before we even got into that, we spent a few minutes connecting over something equally important: our beautiful Latina heritage. And now I'm thrilled to introduce her to you. Ana Martinez is a licensed mental health counselor and a nationally accredited board certified counselor with a master's and education specialist degree from Florida State University. Go Knowles!
Yeah.
After years in community mental health, she founded her own practice, Lumen Cordis Behavioral Health, where she helps individuals navigate anxiety, depression, and trauma. She specializes in working with teens, young adults, and women, especially Latinas, guiding them towards self awareness, healing, and embracing their authentic selves. Anna also conducts psychosocial evaluations for immigration cases, drawing from her deep understanding of immigrant families and her passion for accessible mental health care. As a certified mental health first aid instructor for adults and youth, she leads workshops in both English and Spanish, working to break down stigma and expand mental health resources in the community. So, let's dive in. Anna, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Diana. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So I just want to ask because the mental health first aid, and I know that I had to do that when I worked at the high school, at the alternative high school, for the youth mental health first aid. And it was really, I was almost going to go get certified to teach it as well. And I know like we're going to talk about EFT people, but to me, I want others to understand what this mental health first aid and being the instructor and everything. Can you just share a little bit about that? Because to me, I know how important it was for me to get my staff certified in that. It was a wonderful program.
Yeah. One of the things that we compare it to is like CPR, right? So most people that work with people are trained in CPR to help those that may be in distress. And this is kind of similar, but related to mental health. So we talk to people that maybe don't have the background in psychology or anything like that to recognize what might be some signs that someone's going through something, right? And then we have a 5-step action plan that we work throughout the day. We teach them the steps and how to use it. For the youth part, how to use it with teens. And then the adult module helps them how to talk to adults and implement that plan to help kind of check in with the person. It informs them what resources out there. A lot of people, because of the stigma, don't know what providers they can go to, like where to reach out and get help. And maybe they know, like, oh, I should go to a psychologist, but they have no clue how to look for one, right? They have no clue what therapy is or what it looks like. And so it's basically giving them the basics as to like, okay, these are the things you would be looking for. These are the things that you might notice. This is how you approach someone. What are the things you might want to consider? And then these are the resources we have available in the community. And honestly, it does open up people's eyes in a way that is just so, in a way, healing because then they go, I've had participants be like, you know what? Like, I need to go check on my son, right? Like, I've been seeing
Yeah.
these things and I haven't had the conversation. And others where they're like, oh, like, this would have been so helpful when that person came into the office a couple of days ago and like I had no idea how to talk to them, right? And so I think it is a lack of knowing. A lot of people expect that answer, I'm okay and everything's fine from everyone. And when
Yeah,
someone says, like, actually, it's not that great, people just like freeze and they're like, what do I do now?
exactly.
And so it is a great training. And a lot of people just walk away with the skills and being like, yes, let me help my community, right? And that's something that we do, I've done in hospitals and schools and different agencies, but ultimately it's something we could all use for like our neighbors, our family, whatever work environment we're in. So I love that training.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and it has a workbook and everything. I remember there was a
Yeah.
workbook, and the trainer had us in groups, so it was interactive. It was pretty cool. I mean, if you're like an introvert that don't want to hang out with people, then I don't, but you still can learn a lot. Like it is really informative. And we're therapists, so when I was like there, I'm like, whoa, like even then, I'm like, this is impressive. And I think that every agency should have that certification, and anyone that owns a business, like a big business with more than, let's say, 5 employees, they everybody should be certified. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So all right,
Oh,
so let's
and
get
with that,
back.
wait,
Oh, go
hold
ahead.
on really
Yeah,
quick. I
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
I'm getting super excited, but you do get the participant processing guide now, the workbook. And what I also like to do is I bring in like community resources. So I bring in like a list of different providers where you can go access them. Because then again, it's either for you or for someone else, right? So at
Yeah.
least you have a list like easy to go, easy access. And then people walk away with those resources that they can just take and share with the world. So just wanted to add
Yeah.
that. It is a very active, it's quite a bit long sometimes, but I just think it's so worthwhile.
But it's like the workshop, like listen, like a lot of let's say government agencies or even like big companies, they have to have like certifications and workshops for certain things just so, it's just like that's how you grow by learning new things. To me, this though is one of those programs, and I had to do a lot. Like, when you work for a public school, it's like once a month a teacher training or something like that you're doing. And to me, this one though had the actual like, wow, here is tools. Here are actual resources. This is something that will help a teacher be able just to be a teacher now instead of thinking that they have to do therapy as well. Or, like we're trained, and it gives us boundaries because the
Exactly.
training, right, Anna, like that
Yes.
training gives boundaries to a point where it's like, whoa, you
This is your scope, right?
yeah,
And
like stay in
I
your
like
lane.
exactly. It was updated. The program was developed in Australia and it came to the US like in 2008, but it was recently updated around COVID times. And now it includes things such as trauma and
Mm.
things such as culture, because now we know that, I mean, obviously those things also have a big influence in the way people approach or just interact with mental health.
Yeah. Do you know if they have like a church or faith-based component yet, or how would that work? Can you still like, because to me that's the thing, like, because girl, we had this conversation. I'm trying to break stigma in the churches, like,
Mhm.
and so, or even in our communities, our minority communities, where the second, like, I know there's family members, older family members that, oh, do tú trabajas con los locos. And I'm like, no, it's not about, right? And so to me, like to get a program like this, maybe they'll develop one or you can develop one or we can develop.
Well,
I don't know.
we could work on something, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into EFT. Um, your journey, like I want to know who you are outside of work and what led you to become an EFT practitioner and what is it?
Yeah, so EFT, like you said, is emotional freedom tapping techniques. And I actually came across it back in grad school. So like you mentioned, I went to FSU for undergrad. I loved it, and I stayed there and for my master's. And I remember in practicum, one of my professors would just bring in guests. So we had someone talk about opening their private practice and EFT. I honestly don't remember the other guests, but those were the two that kind of stuck in my mind. But I remember this lady coming in and just tapping, right? And I was like, what is this? And I'm like, this is ridiculous. This does not work. And I kind of just dismissed that, right? And so years go by, I started, came back to South Florida. I'm in West Palm now. And my first job was community mental health. So I worked with a lot of people, a lot of teens and kids that are under DCF, with, with their cases and stuff like that. So I saw a lot of trauma.
Mm.
And, we are very trained to do CBT. And that was kind of like you leave school, and if you know anything, it is how to do CBT, right? And that's it. So, granted, it is helpful in some cases. I was also seeing that it was not always going through. It was not always, as fruitful as it could be or as healing as I was hoping. And then I started working after a Catholic charities and I was seeing different, and I was always learning. I was always eager to learn, like, okay, how can I help my clients? So I did this training, that training, and it was just like opening my eyes, right? And then we
Hmm.
had that shooting down in Parkland a couple years ago, and I was
6 years
part of,
ago. That was,
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
2018. I'll never forget that. That's what
yeah,
made me come back to being a therapist, Anna. I was in
yeah.
a whole different career.
Wow.
So yeah, yeah,
It changed a lot. And I mean,
it
sometimes I
changed
even get chills,
everybody's
right? Like
life.
it flew by, and it's also like not a lot has changed, unfortunately, in a lot of areas. But anyway, so that happened. I was part of the crisis team for Catholic Charities, and so they sent me down to a high school
Mhm.
um, because I mean, it is a very small community. So people know each other, whether it's the students, whether it's the teachers, and just to be available for the community, right? And then
Yeah,
through that, all sorts of resources started coming out in the community, and the community really did come together for that, right? And like
yeah,
wanted to provide that support. Um, and I found a training because I'm always looking for trainings that was like how to help with trauma healing. And I just
yeah,
showed up. It was a whole weekend training, and I just signed up myself and showed up. Um, I guess I was just one of those like I just need this. I just wanted to help, I was just so
yeah.
eager. I showed up and it was like EFT and I was like, "Oh." And I was like, "This is what I saw in like grad school." And I was like, "Okay, well, like let me check it out." Um, and that weekend honestly changed it for me, right? Like I learned more in depth about trauma.
Hmm.
And the instructor had actually worked with survivors from the Sandy Hook shooting
Oof.
years ago. So
Mhm.
she had experienced something similar from the Parkland incident. And the beautiful thing was that were different providers coming together to work on that. And she kept coming back once a month, right? And so then I got super into it and continued the process in order to get certified. But then, yeah, I guess I was exposed to it in grad school, and then, but it was the Parkland shooting and that eagerness to like support the community that it was like, this actually is a way to heal. And I still use it.
Yeah. So okay, so emotional freedom technique. Who made it and how long has it been around and like what is it? I mean, all I ever seen was people like touching their cheeks. And I get it. I get that because I'm into acupuncture, I'm into chiropractic care, into somatic, like moving your stuff out of your system and so tell me a little more about the actual technique and like who like someone had to
Yeah.
start it.
So, okay, so, and you're exactly right. It is based on Chinese acupressure points, right? So we tap on specific points. And it also has the evidence-based part, like a positive psychology. Nowadays, we're seeing like all sorts of EFT exercises, and some of them, we're still able to do as coping. But if we were to stick truly to the protocol, it goes into Chinese acupressure points and it ties in the positive psychology part of it as well. And so what it does, it's basically, if we look into trauma, right, we have that part of our brain, the amygdala, what it just like signals something's going on and it releases all these chemicals and then our body goes into that fight, flight, or freeze response. So what we're doing is when we're tapping in those points,
Hmm.
we are helping re-regulate the amygdala. And then it also works with the hippocampus, so like that part of the memory part of our brain, and it takes the charge out of it. So I tell my clients, I'm like, it's not like I can't erase the past, right? I can't erase anything that has happened. And we're gonna remember it, but it's like a wound. So when you fall off a bike or you get hurt,
Hmm.
it hurts in the beginning, and as it heals, it might still kind of hurt. And you might have a scar though. So every time you look at it, you will remember the incident, but it won't be painful. And
Hmm.
EFT is one of those modalities where it's like we're not erasing it, but every time you look at that scar or you remember it, it won't hurt as much, right?
Right.
Because we're working with that part of our brain that takes that charge out. And so at this point, it's been growing. It's been researched in like, I don't know, 10 plus countries, and there's different papers written about it. And the interesting part, I actually took a note of it,
Mhm.
is because they have been able to show through fMRI and PET scans that it calms the amygdala down, right? So
Wow.
like just those pressure points, like, and it's something that you can do yourself, right? Like it's something that we can do yes, for therapy, but then I tell my clients, I'm like, pick a point and use that whenever you're feeling stressed, just to help your body regulate yourself so that you can think better, right? So this is a great approach for trauma, but also for self-care as well.
So it's like grounding, like you're grounding yourself,
Yeah.
but it's not EMDR then. It's not like you're sitting there with, just hit my microphone. So okay, so before we even go further, can we do some of it? Can you just show us? And for those that are either driving or listening only, you probably will be able, you can watch this on YouTube to actually see, because I don't know how she's gonna if we're touching ourselves. But to me, like sometimes you're right, my brain will start going 100 miles per hour, and I've had to learn how to regulate. And it's also due to how I was raised, because I was raised in an environment that caused me to go into fight mode, mostly fight mode. I wasn't a freezer much, and people know that. They know my story if you've listened to other episodes. But to me, I've seen kids in like alternative schools learning this technique. I've seen video footage of like the classroom, because we have a lot of different students that do not have the resources like others, where they have a calm environment. Correct. Like, their schools are in the inner city, and it could be a little more, everybody's on flight mode I mean, fight mode. And so to calm them down, or calm us down, or, right now, calm me down, Anna.
Yeah, and we could definitely do it. One of the things I also want to share is that,
Okay.
I mean, I can share, I have a worksheet that I send my clients so that you can see the points, so I can share that with you as well.
Yes.
Um, it is very grounding. And so one of the points, and we'll go over them, is like at the top of the head. And I tell my clients, I don't expect you to be in your office going like this at the time. So I get it, right? We don't want to look silly, but we also have a point on our hands. And I'm like, you could do that underneath the desk or somewhere where you can't see, right? And I'll show you all the points right now too. But
Okay,
I was like,
cool.
there are some that you could just do as you take a deep breath in, right? And like, no one needs to know. Like, people are fidgeting all the time,
Hey,
everywhere.
look what I'm doing right now. Do you
Yeah.
know this thing? I'm constantly either touching this thing, or I have the anxiety ring that I'm always touching, because and I wish I had what you're about to teach. I wish someone would have taught me back in the day, because I got in a lot of trouble in elementary school. They, especially in Catholic school, when I couldn't sit still. If they had ADHD back then, I probably would have been diagnosed. I probably have adult ADHD, but tough noogies, this is who I am, and I'm okay, I guess.
Like, I do it. Yeah. Well, and this can also help you then ground. Like, and I found myself like, again, it's not to avoid our feelings. It's a
Right.
better way to like ground yourself and be able to think it through, right? So in moments where I'm like super emotional, I'll just tap and take a deep breath in and be like, okay, like let me, depending on where I'm at and what I'm doing, okay, let's explore and like cope with it and, problem solve. Or let me put this to the side, deal with what I have in front of me and come back to it when I need to. Um, Okay, so let me show you the points and then we can go through a whole exercise. We are going to start with like on the side of our hand by like our pinky finger and
Hmm.
gently but firmly tapping there. Exactly, right there. So that's going to
Okay.
be our first point. Okay.
Hmm.
And then the next one, which is I think one of the silliest ones to look at, is the top of our head. So where your crown would go. I tell my clients, it's like where you wear your crown, right there.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Yeah. And these are
And
these are actually acupuncture pin. I mean, I'm seeing like my acupuncturist will put a pin up here and here. Man, all right.
yeah. And so you're probably going to recognize these. Then we're going to go between your eyebrows. Hmm.
Mm.
And as we're doing these, I also tell my clients you can take a deep breath in, right? So inhale, absolutely exhale. And then we're going to go on the side of our eyes. Hmm. Another one is underneath your eyes. The next one is going to be underneath your nose, above the lips, on your chin.
So it's not like a hard tap. It's
Just
just
gentle but firm.
gentle
So,
but firm. So you're not
mhm.
punching your face or
Please don't hurt yourself. Next is going to be the clavicle. And it's interesting because some of my clients tell me like some of the spots, depending on how you're feeling, they may be relieving, and some of them they're like uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
The next one is going to be like underneath your armpit, like by your bra strap.
Okay.
And you can just kind of like hug yourself and raise myself up
Oh,
too. And I do that
okay.
on both sides. hmm
Wow. I haven't had needles here.
And the last one is going to be between your pinky and your ring finger on the top of your hand. Uh-huh. Okay.
Wow.
So those are the points that we do. Um, and so one of the things I invite people, well, actually, let me ask you, which was there one that like,
The clavicle.
yeah.
That one was the one I felt the most. It shot like not goosebump. Yeah, it was kind of like goosebumpy. Like, like, oh, okay. Ooh.
Yeah.
Not, all right. Make sure I stay awake.
Well, and this is something that also like
Yeah.
stimulates like that release of like endorphin, right? So it like helps us reduce the pain. So actually one of the studies was shown that it also helps with physical pain, right? So we've had different, and I mean, right? Our emotions, if we don't cope with them, they're going to impact our body.
Yes.
So this is a great way not only to deal with our mental health and our feelings, but then also to help with our physical health. Ultimately, it's just our health, right? Both of them are
Yes.
in our health.
I think we forget we're whole beings. Like we have
Yes.
to be taking care of all parts of us. And that
Yeah.
would be, physical. I mean, they're all connected. So to me, how I see it is if one's off, then the others will get off too. They'll end up, and then you're trying to figure out like, oh no, is it an ulcer or is it because I'm so stressed out because I have not had self-care and I'm working, 80 hours a week and I haven't even took a deep breath yet. And that, people shallow breathe throughout our westernized culture constantly.
All the time, all the time. And taking a deep breath. Like, again, I tell my clients, I was like, everyone knows how to breathe. You just have to pause and take a deeper breath and let it out. And like, you don't have to go because most of the people will say, like, I don't have time, right, to do self-care
Yes.
studies. I don't have time, whatever. I was like, you breathe all the time. So just pause, take a
Right.
longer breath in and out, and there's your self-care, right? Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a whole full hour massage, but little things that we can do here and there
Yeah.
ultimately are helping our well-being overall.
So how long do you recommend when you first start out with EFT? Like if you're teaching them, I think too though, what I see, it's kind of going like, I don't know if I will take the time to actually do this on my own. Maybe if I train myself well, but I would want to, in therapy, because I know I'll do a little bit of breath with my clients in the first minute because, they're either I'm online full time and a lot of mine are professional, mostly women, and, from lawyers to, accountants, stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, this is your time. We're going to breathe now. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you're paying me the big bucks so I can get you to focus and calm down and realize that you're allowed. It's like giving them permission to care for themselves. So, how long do you usually would you suggest to do this or like because it is and people feel guilty for taking care of themselves for like in a way, right? Especially let's go into our culture.
Yeah,
We're
especially
trained to, right? Go ahead, Anna.
especially within our culture, but then also just like as women, right? We are almost like set to take care of other people, right? And maybe it's not explicitly, but just the what we see, right? We are the caretakers, the nurturers, and so that's what we end up doing. And it's always like other first and you last.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of guilt that comes to with taking care of yourself. Um, but yeah, I guess going a little bit to the other question, how long? I first introduced it to my clients with something small, something annoying, right? So we all have a little annoying things, that petty annoyance, right? So whether it was like traffic, whether it was food, anything. So we'll do it with something small because it does look weird. It is kind of
Mhm.
odd. And people, again, sometimes are not as open. And then once they feel the relief, then we can use it further. And so I do the whole protocol with them in session and I do the different steps with them. But I tell clients, pick one spot that you like. And I'm like, all you need to do, take a deep breath while you tap on there and then exhale, and then you're done. That's your homework. Like just do that throughout the week, right? You don't have to do it, you don't have to say anything. just do one thing. And I'm like, you can even step out, go to the bathroom. That doesn't even take 30 seconds. And then you're out,
Right.
like, and you're taking care of yourself, right? So
Yeah.
it's finding small ways like to incorporate it, especially for women, because we're all so busy trying to do all the things and maybe also feeling guilty, like, oh no, I can't take a break to take care of myself, or I should be doing X, Y, and Z. This is something small that it's like, okay, well, you're in the car picking up your kids, just tap on the hand, right? When you are waiting for the coffee or the tea or whatever in the morning, just tap it here and take a deep breath in. So it's something that maybe can help them slowly start changing and then bringing it back to them and
Mm,
noticing their feelings and what they need. And I think that also opens the door for them to be like, no, you know what? I do need a break or I do need this. And hopefully through work,
mm.
also being able to do that for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't take the break, you're going to end up having a breakdown.
Yeah.
And then hopefully it turns into a breakthrough.
Oh, I love that. Yes.
But it's true. Okay. And then so let's talk a little bit about our culture. I love being a Latina. I do. I do because it's such a rich culture. And I mean, where is I forgot. Sorry.
No, that's it.
Where are you from again? Or
Peru.
Peru. Okay.
Yeah.
And so my mom's Colombian and my dad's Puerto Rican, so I had the Caribbean thing happening and that was high stress. I mean, I love my Caribbean people. I do. But I also was raised in that, where it's like everybody just yelling all the time. And then sometimes like people like I remember my son saying, why do you I'm like, no, this is how we are. But I also realize now, like, whoa, there was a lot of unhealed people around. I did not know. So how do we disentangle what is our rich culture and what's unhealed trauma that we make excuses for, saying that it's because we're Latino, we're like that?
Oh, that's a very deep question. That's and I think it has all sorts of layers. I mean, I love being Latina. I love a lot of aspects of it. I think also like we come from a very community based, right? So we go back to the family, we go back to our faith, we go like there's a lot of things that maybe like bring us together. Um, but within that too, it's so easy to lose ourselves, right? Because it is like, oh, the family, 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 and then it's like, okay, we're about me. So I think it's a process also of recognizing and being aware of your own feelings. And I think even for me, right, it's sometimes harder to like hear my own voice or know my own feelings and get to know yourself. So I think, yeah, I think the first step would be awareness. And I feel
Mm,
like I could go through all those ways, but I think it's just awareness and being like, okay, like some of the things are going to bring you joy and, good feelings and things like that. And then if something doesn't, then pay attention to why it's not, right? So we could all be a very happy family, and every family time could be something that brings you joy and that you've come out feeling refreshed. But then for some people, it could be like, oh my gosh, I dread going to see my family, or every time I see them, there's this one person or the whole family is just draining, right? So maybe
mhm,
pay attention to that, right? Like, yes, family is important, but you are also important. So like, let's see, like, what can you do so that it doesn't feel that way? And maybe it's limiting the time. Maybe it's recognizing those things, right? So it's like, honestly, it comes within the person, right? So I think it's really hard. And even like you mentioned, like even though we're all Latinos, every
mhm.
country has their own like little thing, right?
Oh,
So
don't get me started because I just remember growing up with both. Think about South America, like whose Spanish was better. And then, first of all, I was born in America, like I'm born in New York. And so that's one thing I hear a lot from people that come from, the parents might be from one country and then you're come here and then you get Americanized. And it's just, you feel like you don't have a place. Because if I'm with my family, I don't feel because I was raised really different than they were. They came from hard places. I mean, when I say hard places, so I'm the spoiled American.
mm,
And then I'm in a school and I don't look like most of the people there. So it's just like, oh, I don't feel like I belong with them. And I think that's why my faith is so important because to me, Jesus says I belong with him and, and he loves me no matter what. So
well,
go ahead.
I was born and raised in Peru, and
Yeah.
then I came here when I was about 13. So I feel like
Mhm.
the first time I went back, it was also like people were like, "Oh, you're from the States." So again, that kind of like, where do I belong? Where do I fit? Right? Like over here, I don't get when people talk. about like the cartoons they used to watch when they were kids because I was not here for that. So it's like I have no idea. And then over there, it's like now like that they've grown, there's different things that I'm like not talking
Mhm.
about, right? So there's just a mix about like where do we go? And actually, when I first got to college, church was like the place where I just felt safe. Like I just walked in and I was like, no matter
Mhm.
what, like every Sunday I was just there and it was like my safe place because anywhere I went, like anywhere in the world, it was just like I knew that was going to be the constant, the stable thing. And so most people during college just go off and like, forget about the faith. But then for me, that was the one thing that I was like, okay,
Uh,
this is like
Florida
home.
State is known for the being the number one part. I was up in Tallahassee for a year when I first started college. I went to TCC. It was back
Okay.
then in
Uh-huh.
1991. Ooh, I'm so old. But I was that was going to be my track. I was going to go to Florida State, and that's why I said go Knowles. But not. I don't really care about football people. Sorry. If you were a Gator, I'd be like, is it go Gators? I'm not sure.
I think so. I don't know.
But I get it. Like, so wow, you went to Florida State and you grounded yourself there instead of in the party scene. You were really cool. Good for you. Good for you. I didn't. I went off the deep end. This was BC days, people. So don't judge me. Oh, and BC means before Christ.
Oh, but yeah,
Yeah.
we all need that grounding, right? And depending on the stage that in your life, like that might be it. And so I think it all just comes full circle, and that was it for me.
Yeah. And so it's just like breaking the stigma in our culture because that's something I did here too. Like you're going to be at there, a lot of, not a lot, I shouldn't say that because I don't know everybody, but most of the people that I hear that come from like anywhere, even India or wherever they come from, and they come to America either as a child or, because this is the land of opportunity. That's
Mhm.
something that was taught to me. I'm very patriotic, even though I might not be on any wing, if you know what I mean, especially after this crazy last 10 years. But I do understand. My mom made me understand what it is to be an American. Like she did,
Mm,
because that's why they came here. This is why else would they leave their country and their families,
yeah,
right? You
yeah.
know, to me, it's understanding. Like it was hard because I know I grew up many times where I had these emotions and these feelings, but nobody had time for that. We're working, we're in survival mode. Okay, you have no idea what trauma is, like, okay. How would you deal with a family that or a person that comes to you like saying those things?
Yeah. Well, first I would explain, just like we go to the doctors for our annual checkup, right? This is the same thing for our mental well-being. So people think you have to wait until you've gone through a crisis, you've gone through trauma. Actually, most people don't even think about trauma. They just think like you come to therapy if you're hearing voices or if you're about to hurt someone or something like that. Something
Yes.
extreme, right?
Yeah,
Like people
yes.
don't think about trauma actually. Like they just think like I'm like hearing voices and seeing things and something that's when I should go to trauma.
And that's a
Um,
small percentage of people we see. Tiny
exactly,
percent. It's not
exactly.
the majority. And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, you go to counseling and you're not loca. I mean, oh,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, or like something's wrong with me, right? So I think it's one of
yeah.
those like, hey, you know what? This could be like your checkup, just someone where you can go and like talk to about things. And I was like, we could all use an extra support, and this just gives you the unbiased. So I was like, it doesn't have to be something's going on right now, but maybe this is a place where you can safely grow. You can maybe safely explore different things that happen in your life and the impact. We've all been impacted by different things, right? And so even as I reflect back on my life, like when we first moved to the States, I was very unhappy. And so,
I
like,
can imagine.
and I was like, you know what? Maybe I should have gone to therapy. But like, I didn't even know that, right? Like, I think when I was in elementary school, I might have seen a therapist once, um, once or twice, and that was it. But it's not something we talk about. So I think it's one of the things where having a conversation that this is not something that indicates there's something wrong with you. It could just
Right,
be an extra resource for you.
right.
And if this is going to help you or your family, then why not? If it doesn't work out or this is not a good fit, you can find someone else. But this is just like going to the doctor. And so I think one is like letting people know this is not a place where you come only if there's drastically horrible symptoms going on. Granted, if those are the case, then definitely come to therapy,
Right.
right? And then also with the faith aspect of it, a lot of people say like, "Oh, I'm just gonna pray it out, right? I'm gonna pray it out."
Yes.
And God is wonderful and he's very healing, but then he also gives us all these people around with their expertise. And so if God is putting the, a good fit therapist for
Mm,
you, then
good
that's
fit.
his, yeah, and then that's his way of helping you, right?
Yeah.
And I say good fit because as we know, there are therapists that maybe are just not trained to deal with certain things. And so people go in and then have a horrible experience and they're like, oh, therapy's not for me. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? Yeah, maybe that therapist wasn't for you, but maybe find someone that gets you, that
Yeah.
maybe culturally, right? Like maybe they get your culture. If, you're spiritually based, like maybe find someone that shares that faith. And so finding someone that is a good fit for you and that will be able to be with you on that journey.
Yeah, for sure. And that's it too, because I realize a lot of my clients in the last, I was a therapist and not a therapist for a little bit and then came back to being a therapist. But I've seen hundreds upon hundreds of students because I worked in the high schools and stuff, but they felt more connected because I did look like them. And it's not about racism or anything like that. It's just having understanding in our different cultures. Like to me, like if a black man comes to me, are you sure you want to, have me as your therapist? It's cool. Like we're able, but the connection might be better for the Jamaican guy to go to the Jamaican. I mean, it all depends and it's okay. And we need to understand too, nowadays we do have educated women like us because back in the day it was no offense. I'm married to a white man, but it was think about psychology started with Freud and then all of them were just white men. And it's nothing bad about that situation. It started somewhere, but here we are trying to break stigma in different cultures. So here we are, Anna and I, trying to get Latina females that it isn't a weakness to go get therapy. It isn't a weakness to stop because sometimes we get into that, ay, mira, mírame, estoy haciendo todo, and okay, fine, but it's like, is that helping you? And is that helping you become the person that you need to be? Because you're right, therapy, Anna, is not only for crisis intervention. It should be for crisis prevention, right?
Ideally, yes.
Ideally. And it's and I mean affordable therapy. That I mean, these are the things. This is why the podcast was started because I was telling Anna before we came on, right? It's just like you and I are one person. We can only take on a certain amount of humans during the week. I know I can't take more than 20.
Yeah.
Honestly, I probably can't take more than 9, but in my age and stage of life, right? But you see where I'm getting at is that it's so important, especially if you're listening right now and you're going, I don't know, like, what would you say something in Spanish? Because I can't do that quickly. I mean, I don't do therapy in Spanish, but Anna does. If you were listening to say that 35, 40-year-old mother of two, and she just came from a different country and she feels lonely and scared, but she's ignoring herself, ignoring herself. Now she's got migraines, now she's got an ulcer, and she's ignoring herself,
Mm.
ignoring herself. What would you say to her? And say it in Spanish if you can.
Terapia es un lugar que te puede ayudar a sanar. Entonces, has atravesado bastantes experiencias recientemente que te están impactando no solo emocionalmente, sino a tu cuerpo. Y este es un lugar donde puedes ir poco a poco sanando esas heridas y buscar otros recursos para que te puedas sentir de una manera diferente y que puedas disfrutar de tu vida como quieres.
Wow. Wow. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna start crying. Wow, she
Oh,
just told the person that's listening right now that listen, this is a place where you can get resources and be able to change the course of life. I mean, this is how I how I took it, and
yeah.
that you can get the help you need. And I think you said something like, you're worth it.
Yeah. Well, and I also said, like, you've been through a lot, right? And so all these experiences are obviously impacting you. So this is a place to not only heal your body, but your feelings, right? And like help you go through that and find the research to help you feel better
Yeah.
and then be able to enjoy your life, right? Like the way you want to. Like ultimately, we all want to enjoy our life, right? Like we all want to be happy. And I think a lot of my clients, that's what they come. They're like, I just want to feel better.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. We
we
want
all
to
want
be.
to feel better, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal. So working through that physically, emotionally, mentally. And to your point, right, finding a therapist that is able to do so. If you want Spanish, there are Spanish speaking therapists out there. If you
Mm,
feel more comfortable in English, then do English. If you feel whatever language, it might be a little bit difficult, yes, but like it's worth the wait and like the research you do so that you ultimately find someone that you're able to like open up with. I was actually doing a career fair at an elementary school last week, and I was giving my talk in English, and there was this table, and all of a sudden I just hear like, esta es la mesa de los hombres. Like this is like the man's table. And so like five of the little guys were sitting there or whatever. And throughout the presentation, like other kids were raising their hands and talking, and they were just talking amongst themselves. So I go over and I say something in Spanish, and all of a sudden this kid just looks up at me and he's like, ¿Hablas español? And I was like, yes. And all of a sudden all of them just were like, what? And that was it, right? Like it was one of those like they maybe felt excluded, they just didn't get it, it wasn't for them. But once they had that Spanish, they were like,
mm,
oh, actually, let me pay attention to what you're saying. Like, okay, like
yeah.
how do we, and it was just that moment where you realize that like that diversity is what we need, right? Like in therapy as well. Like there's a whole bunch of therapists. We all don't do the same approach. We all have different backgrounds. We all have maybe different language skills, like all these things. And so obviously there's not a perfect fit, but just
Right.
find someone that you feel comfortable with that maybe has the same language or like the same beliefs that you come in, and then that you feel comfortable with.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to build that rapport for sure. Like
Yeah.
I mean, I go to a therapist and I had to do the homework to find someone that understood me, and just like a lot of different aspects of myself. And they're out there, people. Like I would suggest to go, I mean, do you know of a website besides contacting Anna, which I will put all her information in the show notes. Where else? Isn't there a website called like Therapy for Latinas or
Yeah.
something like that?
Yeah, and then there's like Latinx therapy as well, the
Yeah.
brown girl therapy. There's a couple, and I think in the past couple of years, with everything changing, right, there's been a little bit more of a movement to have those resources available.
Mm,
I've even seen those where they provide scholarships because unfortunately
wow.
we do live in a system where like it can be very hard to go and get those services. So um, I think it's honestly a matter of like, okay, you identifying that this is something that would benefit you and doing your homework and doing your research, right? Like there's going to be a way. I know I also have like some prorated slots. So for people that maybe don't have that coverage or insurance, like can't open up my whole schedule for that. But,
No,
like, and sometimes people like lose a job or the insurance changes and like that should not prevent them from still taking care of themselves, right?
that's right. That's right. You want to prevent, because those are the choices, either prevention or intervention.
Yeah.
That's it. So, where can people find you, Anna?
Yeah, so I do Instagram, so Lumen Cordis Behavioral,
Hmm.
and on my website, lumencordis.com would be the best ways to reach out to me.
Okay. Well, everything we talked about today will be in the show notes. So, any last words of encouragement before we say goodbye?
Yeah, I mean, I will also share that worksheet with you so you can put it on the show notes as well for them to see the tapping points,
Okay.
and for them to maybe hopefully practice that in their own as a self-care skill as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All
Yeah.
right, listener, thank you for listening. And don't forget to trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.